Hello, my name's Gordon Strong. This is my first visit to the West Coast, and I'm particularly pleased to be able to talk to Dan Shaw today, and we'll be talking about all sorts of amazing things here on the West Coast, particularly Vortex energy. And I'll start off by describing an experience that I had when I went to Confusion Hill with Dan recently. Now, what happened was this. I thought that I might do some dowsing outside of the site, as it wasn't open that early in the morning when we arrived. And I thought, there's some energies here. And I also found that I was getting some kind of psychic feedback, you might say, third eye opening and that sort of thing. So I was getting some pretty strong signals that there were energies around. Now the next experience was the one that really took me by surprise, because I just should tell our listeners that I am 6'2" in height, and Dan Shaw is around 5'7". So Dan is standing about 5 foot away from me, possibly less, and I look over at him, and our eyes are on exactly the same horizontal plane. So we then switch places, and Dan informs me that he is looking at my neck. So something rather extraordinary happening there. Dan, as my first question, can I ask you what was happening?
Well, this shrink and grow phenomena that can be observed at the Confusion Hill vortex has also been observed at other vortexes as well. There's 9 such vortexes that are actually open as tourist attractions around the U.S., Confusion Hill being just one of them. The apparent change in height that occurs when two people change places really hasn't been fully explained. It's visible to the participants, it's visible to an observer, it can be photographed. When the photographs are measured, it's clear that there is an observed change in height when people change places. My research with my co-author, which has been published in the Vortex Field Guide, draws an analogy to refraction, such as when you'll see stem of a rose in a vase, and there's an apparent discontinuity between the stem of the rose at the surface of the water, and that's due to the change in the way the light refracts through the air and the water. But there is no such interface at these vortexes that we can tell. But it seems that this phenomena, this of apparent height change, occurs at a point at the vortex which we call the line of demarcation. These vortexes seem to be spherical. On the ground they look circular, and they do have a kind of a common shape and size. They have an eye. They have a primary and a secondary line of demarcation. And so my research has to do with understanding, measuring, and mapping these vortexes, but I haven't been able to explain or debunk this height change phenomena.
Okay, Dan, thanks very much. Can you give us an idea? I mean, this is obviously a fascinating subject. What is it particularly that attracts you to the whole idea of vortices and perhaps earth energies as well?
Well, I'm fascinated by anything I don't fully understand. I have been studying the vortexes and earth energies for about 15 years, and before that I have been studying unusual healing tools and techniques. I feel that these earth energies are a powerful tool for physical healing and for psychic opening. So that's my interest in studying the vortexes and the earth energies. There are many researchers who have other reasons for studying these energies, including my co-author Nick Nelson, whose website is goldenvortex.com. And his motive for studying these energies is that he's been working with magnets all his life, and he believes that these places may hold the key to building a magnetic motor.
Well, that's a pretty good answer. What about your Vortex maps? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, there are many different kinds of visionary maps. There are maps that show sacred places. There's maps that show alignments of sacred places, or ley lines, straight alignments of many sacred places. There are geometric maps, maps showing circles and stars and other geometric shapes showing the relationship of sacred places. And there are some other types of visionary maps as well. There are maps that show points, sacred places, as reflections of the constellations in the sky. And there are visionary maps that show the landscape as revealing shapes of animals, that kind of thing. So I've been studying, in particular, the natural geometry of the planet, and I've compiled many different visionary and geometric maps, and I've published two. One is the Earth Star Globe. It's a world map that folds up into a globe and shows the natural geometry of the planet and the geometric relationship of places such as the Great Pyramids, pyramids in Mexico, Easter Island, Bermuda Triangle, and such. And I've also published a map of Western North America, which shows a circle of 19 significant mountains and bodies of water around the Grand Tetons. And these are hard to describe, but people can view them at vortexmaps.com.
Good, thanks, Dan. The notion of Earth grids, do you want to expand a little bit about that?
Well, the term Earth grid or planetary grid has been used by many different researchers. There are almost as many different systems of mapping the Earth's energies as there are researchers. There's the grid, which is the geometric grid of the Earth Star Globe. That is a combination of the icosahedron and the dodecahedron. These two polyhedra are duals. One has points where the other has faces and vice versa, so they nest very beautifully in a sphere or in the globe. And those geometric points are one kind of a grid. Other researchers have identified other kinds of grids, some beneficial and some actually grids of harmful Earth energies.
That idea of negative Earth energies is something I'd like to discuss with you a bit later. But there is a particular thing I want to say. Of course, coming from England, we are extremely aware of ley lines, and they are particularly easy to plot on a map, simply because we have probably so many sacred sites, tumuli and churches, for instance. Can you give us an idea how you would define or give us the difference between a ley line and an energy line?
Sure. The term ley line, coined by Alfred Watkins, refers to straight alignments of points such as churches and prehistoric sites, as you mentioned. Energy line, much more broad term. There are sinuous kinds of energy lines, and they're lines that are not necessarily straight. The types of energies that we're talking about, I like to be pretty precise. I have a degree in geography, hopefully to help me better describe these kinds of unusual phenomena. So we're talking about energies which are magnetic, You can see maps showing magnetic disturbances that are issued by the Aviation Administration. Air charts show these magnetic disturbances at one scale, and we've been able to show magnetic anomalies which are statistically significant on the ground at these vortexes, in particular Confusion Hill, using a magnetometer. So there's magnetic energies, electric energies, there are gravitic factors to consider too, and possibly sound energies may play a part in these phenomena.
I suppose for the benefit of listeners who might be interested in some of the major ley lines or places, central points on ley lines in America, in a conversation we had earlier this week, you were talking about Washington, D.C. Can you say something a little bit about that?
Sure. There is a researcher on the East Coast named Peter Champeau who has done much work, published a book called Gaia Matrix, which has many, many different kinds of visionary maps and focuses on the patterns on the East Coast. There are patterns of circles, there are patterns of 5- and 6-pointed stars, and he also identifies some ley lines. He gives these ley lines names that imply certain characteristics. One such ley line is the Empire ley line, and that moves through Washington, D.C., and I believe also London. And the sacred architecture of Washington, D.C. is pretty well known. There's been a number of books published on the topic. It was designed taking principles of sacred geometry into account, and the original design, unfortunately, has been somewhat tampered with over the years.
Sure. Okay. What about looking at something which I suppose I'm quite interested in, because the phenomena occurs in the British Isles, that of stone circles. Would I be right in thinking that perhaps an equivalent kind of site in America would be the American Indian medicine wheels?
That's true. The medicine wheels are perhaps not quite as impressive as the stone circles, such as Stonehenge. They're not built with monolithic stones, but with many smaller stones. But they seem to have been built with very much the same purpose in mind. Stonehenge and, for example, and medicine wheels are a way of showing the unity between time and space. They are kind of a calendar and a map, and they're designed to view certain celestial events, such as the rising and setting of the sun or the moon or certain stars on certain festival days. And these medicine wheels that are found all over North America have been used for ceremony and for a kind of calendar, and also as a way with working with the energies of the place.
Sure. So just turning to perhaps natural features in the landscape, we don't have many volcanoes in England, but you have a few here, and presumably the lava flows that are produced by volcanoes would I be right in thinking these are centers of energy?
Certainly, where magma erupts and hardens into lava, it creates an anomaly in the overall magnetic field, especially as the planetary field changes over time. Those lava flows are a kind of relic locked into the magnetic alignment of the past. So there are some certainly magnetic anomalies where you have lava fields, and remembering my interest is in how these kinds of energies affect our human energy field. Some people are sensitive to these kinds of energies, and everybody experiences these energies in their own way. I sometimes get a tingling in my head or in my face when I move into these places where the energies are somewhat different. Mount Shasta is a perfect example of a place where there's volcano, lava fields, glaciers, hot springs, and a number of features all in one place, which indicate that it's a vortex. And certainly it's been recognized as a place that has kind of a refined spiritual energy.
So this brings us rather neatly, perhaps, to the notion of negative energies. One of the points I want to raise with you is the enormous amount of road building that has gone on in the 20th century and in our own century. Freeways, throughways, highways, interstate. And do you think that those grids of construction have interrupted the flow of natural energy?
There's no question that where those roads have been put through, blasted through mountaintops, where they cross animal migratory pathways, which are often along grid lines, those kinds of human activity like road building, mining, other kinds of resource harvesting can affect the grid energies. And so my work is largely about sensitizing people to these subtle energies and these vortex points, and doing ceremony, being grateful, playing drums, dancing, being joyous, singing, making music at these vortex points to re-energize and re-harmonize the grid.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good thing to do. One of the things that's not been good to do, of course, is the installation of military sites on energy lines, deliberately located on those lines and disrupting the natural energy. Do you have evidence of this?
On my website, I do document many points which are grid points, which there are military installations. For example, the point, which is a world grid point in Baja California, is a very large array of satellite dishes. And also there are many points where there are nuclear materials stored, or nuclear labs, nuclear test sites even, on the grid. So all indications are that the government is aware of this energy grid system and doing research at these points of various kinds. So all the more important for those of us with positive, peaceful intention and consciousness to be doing work at these grid points to clear the energy.
Sure. And you made the point to me when we were talking earlier about the human aura and the earth aura. Can you go into that idea a bit more?
Yes, my thesis is that there is no separation between the human energy field and the planetary energy field. So the earth energies have the potential to affect the human aura, the human energy field, for physical healing and for psychic opening. And also our presence at these vortex points can also affect the earth itself. The analogy has been drawn to the acupuncture meridians in the human body, and how we can act in a way like acupuncture needles to help rebalance these energy channels in the earth, but simply by our presence there and our intention.
And your point about conducting ceremony and rituals at these places. Would the result of that be a kind of psychic opening, the appearance of a portal, perhaps, into other worlds?
There are researchers, certainly, who feel that these vortex points are kind of portal into other dimensions. There are people who are researching the connections between these Earth energy grid points and grid lines and UFO sightings. In fact, one of the original researchers identified a type of grid. Bruce Cathy identified a type of grid by mapping out UFO sightings in the area of New Zealand. And a fellow, Joe Hauser, who owns the Montana Vortex, is a Bigfoot researcher, and they're getting all kinds of orb photos of light orbs at the Montana Vortex, and those same kinds of orb phenomena have been photographed at other vortexes as well. So there are certainly people who have the experience that these vortex points seem to open up to other places.
I'm fascinated by the idea of the Bigfoot. This is a term that I only came across really in America in my visits. This is presumably the same as what is named the Yeti in Tibet. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I mean, is it a, how shall we say, a manifestation of Earth energies?
I can say that there are numerous vortex points that are associated with what may be called cryptozoological beings. Loch Ness is very near a grid point there. There's Tahoe, has a kind of a mystical animal called Tahoe Tessie. Lake Okanagan has a lake monster they call Ogopogo. And Shasta has also been known for its Bigfoot sightings, its sightings of panther, kind of a magical panther, beings from other star systems and from inside the Earth. So there's certainly some connection to be made between these places and all kinds of mysteries, actually. Even crop circles, some researchers have asserted geometric relationship between vortexes and crop circles.
One thing I'd like to ask you, because I'm quite interested in a phenomena that I associate with Sedona particularly, is the notion of a male vortex and a female vortex. I think traditionally we refer to Mother Earth, so we tend to think of the Earth as being a female embodiment. Do you want to comment on that?
Sure. Vortexes have been classified in any number of different ways. They've been classified as masculine and feminine, as positive, negative, and neutral, as yin, yang, and neutral, many different ways. My understanding of the vortexes is that they work very much like electrodes, that they are paired, that there's an anode and a cathode, so to speak, or you could say a masculine and a feminine pole, where there's a circuit flowing between them. At Mount Shasta has a little companion, which is called Black Butte, and Shasta is known as the feminine. Black Butte is the masculine pole, and there's a circuit of energy that runs between them in the air and on the surface and underground. And when we place ourselves in that circuit, for example, when we spiral up around Black Butte as we're climbing up and then back down, we're giving ourselves a kind of energetic balancing, energetic cleansing as we move through these subtle but still profound electromagnetic fields, I believe.
One point I'd like to make is the the Native Americans, obviously before the white men came to this country, we're talking here about an unspoiled landscape, and what is it that you think particularly made the nature of that landscape? Would you say that all these phenomena, all these spiritual energies were stronger and more intact before the arrival of the colonists?
I would say that certainly human activity, electromagnetic pollution have numbed our senses in some degree to our perception of these energies, which are still all around us, and that the energies in that earlier time were probably in better balance. What we're seeing now is we're seeing the results of imbalance in extreme weather events and die-off of animal species and that kind of thing. These are, in some part, at least, results of an imbalance caused by human activity and an impact on the energetic field of the planet.
Telling words, Dan, and particularly relevant to our times. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners on your very varied researches?
Well, I want to thank you very much, Gordon, and I want to encourage listeners to check out your website, which will be gordonstrong.com. And I want to encourage listeners to continue this dialogue with me directly by contacting me through my website, vortexmaps.com. I'm very much interested in sharing my research and in hearing from other researchers. I'm particularly interested, as I said, in using ceremony to help reharmonize the earth and leading tours to these sacred places, consulting people on how to harmonize and rebalance their property. And I'm fascinated by all the different directions that this research takes me. It's been a pleasure to share research with you, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. So thanks very much, Gordon.
Thanks, Dan. Dan, as my first question, can I ask you what was happening?
Well, this shrink and grow phenomena that can be observed at the Confusion Hill vortex has also been observed at other vortexes as well. There's 9 such vortexes that are actually open as tourist attractions around the U.S., Confusion Hill being just one of them. The apparent change in height that occurs when two people change places really hasn't been fully explained. It's visible to the participants, it's visible to an observer, it can be photographed. When the photographs are measured, it's clear that there is an observed change in height when people change places. My research with...
Hello, my name's Gordon Strong. This is my first visit to the West Coast, and I'm particularly pleased to be able to talk to Dan Shaw today, and we'll be talking about all sorts of amazing things here on the West Coast, particularly vortex energy. And I'll start off by describing an experience that I had when I went to Confusion Hill with Dan recently. Now, what happened was this. I thought that I might do some dowsing outside of the site, as it wasn't open that early in the morning when we arrived. And I thought, there's some energies here. And I also found that I was getting some kind of psychic feedback, you might say, third eye opening and that sort of thing. So I was getting some pretty strong signals that there were energies around. And the next experience was the one that really took me by surprise, because I just should tell our listeners that I am 6'2" in height, and Dan Shaw is around 5'7". So Dan is standing about 5 foot away from me, possibly less, and I look over at him, and our eyes are on exactly the same horizontal plane. So we then switch places, and Dan informs me that he is looking at my neck. So something rather extraordinary happening there.
My co-author, which has been published in the Vortex Field Guide, draws an analogy to refraction, such as when you'll see a stem of a rose in a vase and there's an apparent discontinuity between the stem of the rose at the surface of the water, and that's due to the change in the way the light refracts through the air and the water. But there is no such interface at these vortexes that we can tell. But it seems that this phenomena, this of apparent height change, occurs at a point at the vortex which we call the line of demarcation. These vortexes seem to be spherical. On the ground they look circular, and they do have a kind of a common shape and size. They have an eye. They have a primary and a secondary line of demarcation. And so my research has to do with understanding, measuring, and mapping these vortexes, but I haven't been able to explain or debunk this height change phenomena.
Okay, Dan, thanks very much. Can you give us an idea? I mean, this is obviously a fascinating subject. What is it particularly that attracts you to the whole idea of vortices and perhaps earth energies as well?
Well, I'm fascinated by anything I don't fully understand. I have been studying the vortexes and earth energy